I want to do like a partial review of the game along with a discussion on why people are leaving the game. And so I'll start off by saying like in terms of the game itself as a review of the game now with 1100 hours in the game, what I think about it. And so what I got to say is, very similar to Gloria Victis, there's a conceptually the game has a lot going for it. There's a lot of fun to be had. It's a lot more hardcore than other similar games that I've played. There's definitely no hand holding in this game. Um, I it was as a new player, it was pretty kind of shocking, like how kind of what kind of baptism of fire it was. But I like that. That's something that I personally liked, and I believe that the kinds of people who like that kind of an experience, where the kid gloves are off and you got to survive by your own wits, like pretty much right away. That's fun, and some of the best memories, like for players like that, some of the best memories you have of the game are from that initial time you start. Anyway, the beginning aside, there there are lots of other things that are great about the game too. For example, one of the best things of the game is the fact that it's just one server, kind of like Eve Online is, and so everybody that plays the game is playing on this in the same server as everybody else. So what that means is you have a very sort of like lively, alive feeling to the game whenever you play it, because somewhere there's people playing, and you can encounter them, or they're going to encounter you, or they're coming for you, or you're coming for them. Especially when you're in one of the more mainstream guilds. There are big wars and things like that. You can have the potential to get into fights where there's hundreds of players there. Um, Although talking about that kind of starts to go into some of the criticisms of the game too, which I'll get into in a little bit. One of the other good aspects of the game is the way that they handle your character development. There's a lot of room for you to tailor your character. You don't have to. It's not a game where you pick a class and then things are predetermined. You basically choose your skills and your stats and your race, and depending on the combination of all that, then you can basically make something like a class come to be. Like for example, conceptually, what a warrior would be or a fighter from Dungeons and Dragons, you can essentially build a character that would play like that, but it wouldn't be called a fighter. It wouldn't be called any particular thing. It would just be due to like how you put your points into the different skills and attributes and stuff. So that's a good thing too. But a lot of these things I'm talking about, you can know about the game just from looking looking into it just a little bit. A lot of these things are some of the first things you learn about the game, and actually I don't really want to spend a lot of time on those things that are easy to know. I want to spend more time on things that you need hundreds of hours to kind of like figure out. I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say that overall the game is a really good concept. Like the choices that have been made about like how the game is supposed to function, and I want to put emphasis on the word supposed to function, the way it's supposed to play. Um, if it plays the way it's supposed to, the game there's not many games out there that are an equal to this game, or an improvement on it. It's got one of the the most attractive sort of concepts of any game out there. Um, but then if that's the case, you might be thinking, why isn't it more popular? Well, there's lots of reasons for that, and that's what I'm going to get into as well. So suffice it to say, for what it is and what genre it's in, it's conceptually it's up there, if not the number one game of its type right now. Especially now that Gloria Victis is gone. And Gloria Victis was another one of those games that was like conceptually very very strong, but due to the poor decisions of the developers, it's basically sunk the game. And I got into that in another video about Glory Victis. What you had with Glory Victis was some of the people who knew the game the best having nothing but bad things to say about it ultimately, other than its concept. And they would all those same people would say the game had great potential, but that potential was squandered due to the stubbornness and lack of good judgment of the developers. Um, like when it came to actually how to implement their game and whether or not to listen to their players. And ultimately that's sort of like the common theme that I'm seeing across so many games. There's just so many games out there that refuse to listen to their players when their players have very reasonable criticism of their decisions they've been making, and they refuse to alter course despite all that. You essentially have like communities that resoundingly are telling the developers what they need to do to make the game be successful, and they, for some reason, developers just don't listen. They just refuse to listen. And it's not like these things that people are saying are hard to implement. It's just a matter, in most cases, in most of these situations, just a matter of developers just deciding, just making a decision with not even having to invest anything in implementing the change of course. For example, in Glory Victis, all they had to do was change the way they did the way their disciplinary system was. Instead of banning people and not telling them why they were banned and refusing to elaborate on it so they could, potentially avoid similar bans in the future, they just continued doing what they were doing. Like they just, it's almost like there's this war between the players and developers over who's right on particular issues, and the developers are doubling down on themselves being right, and the players are like, "Yeah, you can double down if you want, and we can't stop you from doing that, but your game's going to die." And that's unfortunately the situation I see that Mortal is in at this point. We've already definitely seen signs of it dying. Uh, you know, a lot of people would say it's already dead. It was, and actually never was really alive in the first place. It's not a very popular game, and there's definitely people leaving it more and more. They have some new players coming in, but those new players are coming into a dead game, and like one of the things that kind of is part of the logic of how poison it is for a game to not listen to its players is when a game starts to die, because the game is dying itself becomes a reason for it to die further. And it's very sort of like frustrating for me to see a game with potential not give full appreciation to that reality, and then make adjustments, as many adjustments as they can to kind of keep the game from dying less or make it actually grow. Um, but again, the lack of willingness on the parts of devs to listen to the players, admit they were wrong about certain things, and then adjust. Okay, so I'm going to get into some of the things that this developers got wrong in this game that they refused to change. Um, so I guess what I'll start with is why people are quitting, and what I'm going to bring up in this category is what I've heard from players who quit as being their main reason. And there's been a number of players who have quit that I've gone out of my way to ask why they quit. Not because I was doing any kind of research for a video like this, but that's just a happy side effect of the fact um, that I was interested for other reasons in finding out the answers to those kinds of questions. So, players that have quit that I kind of questioned were players that I played with and people who I enjoyed playing with and wanted to play with more, but then they just got fed up and stopped playing, and I would just want to know why. Um, so, the first one that comes to mind is the performance of the game during larger battles. So, the kind of end game, you could say, this is arguable, but the end game of Mortal Online 2 is the massive player versus player battles that sort of organically occur, where they fight over maybe areas of land, or there's a siege and you have a large group sieging, and then another group will try to counter them at the siege. And the numbers that can kind of grow, how those kind of two sides can grow in numbers and mobilize, it can ramp up pretty quickly. And then all of a sudden you're going to have a group of maybe 1 or 200 get rolled up on by another group of 1 or 200. And if that doesn't sound exciting to you, it really should, because like that is such a cool thing to be part of. How and everybody's sort of like that. Like there's nobody that plays this game that doesn't get pumped up when they hear that something like that might be going down. It's like there's a lot of hype that happens. But what the problem with that is, when people actually get to the fight, what they encounter is a fucking lag fest. All of a sudden, the game just has a shit and just completely starts falling apart, and you get maybe 1 or 2 frames a second. From what I understand, if you have a supercomputer, like if you have a god tier computer, it's not so bad. But I've also heard from people with god tier computers that it's still bad. I've heard mixed things about that. I myself don't have a god tier computer, um, but I've definitely been in lots of battles like that. I've experienced it firsthand. Like the frames just fall through the floor, and in a game like this, that is so destructive of the experience, because it's a skill based game. Like you got to block a certain way to block the angle of attack, whatever angle of attack your opponent is using. You got to be able to respond to all sorts of things happening very quickly. And obviously with more people in the fight, there's more things to respond to. There's more things to react to. You need to be taking in more information and responding more quickly. You can't even take in the information, let alone know what you need to do to respond, let alone be allowed by the game to respond fast enough due to getting like just a few frames per second. So it like and then you're coming into that situation being hyped, like, oh, this is gonna be amazing, like fucking history's being made, shit like this, and then you get this lag fest, and it's like, oh, it's just such a big letdown. It's massive. And of course, like the reason why all that happens is because the game is poorly optimized for that kind of a fight. It's just not, it's just poorly optimized. Like that is a complete ball drop on the part of the developers. You know, it's a kind of a foreseeable area where the game would have an issue too, because it's like, well, how often do fights like that happen? Not that often. They're obviously going to optimize for what's going on the majority of the time, but what they fail to do is properly give way to that is the end game sort of thing that the game offers. And if that end game is just like a complete failure, well, basically your end game is a failure. And so ultimately this game has no working end game at all. Uh, so that's a massive thing, and that has been like, this is one of those things that people who quit the game, who were very active, have said they don't want to play the game anymore over. They're just disgusted by the fact that the end game is so unplayable. It's essentially unplayable. Like the game doesn't work when you're in those kinds of fights. So I think it's pretty fair for them to say it's unplayable. Now that's not the thing that made me want to quit. Although it definitely I found it soul crushing at the same time, but um, I was because the game the most like the way I play like 99% of the time, it's not that I was okay with continuing to play despite that. Um, so but yeah, but that is a big thing. Let's talk about something else. I might as well just get right into what my biggest gripe with the game is, and I don't know I'm not alone in this either. Well, there's sort of two points that I could raise, but these points there's a lot of overlap to them. One of them is, and this is very similar to Glory Victis. I'm just noticing more and more this lack of willingness to listen to the players of the developers of this game. It's the same old thing that I've been encountering in so many other games that ultimately spell the doom um, for the game. Now, if there's any developers that are watching this video, okay, what I need you to know is that uh, right now, what you're listening to is a warning, and if you do not listen to the warning, your game is likely going to go in the toilet, and your studio may collapse. Okay, now, and the reason I'm saying that I'm not that's not a threat. It's just I have spoken on this about other games where I saw this coming. Okay, and maybe you could say there's a little bit of like self-fulfilling prophecy at work here, or and maybe some blame to be had where I might be blameworthy in terms of like making the game actually die. But there are games that I have played that I have similarly had the same complaint about, and that I warned the developers that their game is going to actually die, and there's going to people there's going to be lots of people that are going to lose their jobs because of it, unless you make the adjustments that I'm saying you need to make. And so that's the situation you're looking at here again. So I am seeing it coming. I'm telling you right now, I'm seeing it coming. Your studio is set up to fail at this point, and it's time to make adjustments. And this is how, and I'm going to tell you some specific ways you need to make adjustments beyond the ones I've already mentioned. And this other one is it's you don't even have to develop any kind of technology or anything. All you got to do is make a decision. Okay, so one of the with Glory Victis, the thing that kind of I think sunk its boat was its disciplinary system. So it had this wildly insanely bad disciplinary system where players could get banned for something they didn't even know they were doing wrong, and something they wouldn't even be informed of they were doing wrong. And it was, that's just so like if that seems awkward, if that seems insanely bad, okay, then maybe your judgment isn't that like bad itself. Okay, maybe you have a brain in your head. So, like, just to be a little bit more clear about what I'm criticizing is a disciplinary system where a player could get banned from the game, maybe just temporarily, maybe just like it would always be for way too long of a period if it was temporary. That was another thing, but anyway, they could get banned for doing something, not know what they did that was ban worthy. So they could be playing the game like completely innocently in their mind, like not doing anything wrong, certainly not using any known exploit, and or anything, right? And just get blindsided by a ban and be like, "What the? Why am I banned? What the hell?" And then when they try to find out, they would be told something very vague, like, for example, they could be told you were exploiting, okay? And they'd be like, "What the hell does that mean? Like, what did I do that was an exploit? What could I have even done? That was I don't even know any exploits." They could be having all these thoughts, and then obviously the only people who can answer that are the people who ban them, right? So they could then contact the game or whoever's representing the game, ask for clarification, and then the only people who give clarification just would refuse to. They wouldn't give them any more information than whatever vague indication that they had already gotten. And so these people would have to walk around not knowing why they got banned, and then if they decided to continue to play the game after their ban was expired, they would be playing it like with the understanding that they could just get banned at any time again and not even know it. Because they would know what not to do that the developers didn't want them to do in the first place. They got them banned in the first place. Now in Mortal Online 2, we have some similar things happening. Even as specifically similar as bans. So like people in the help chat. All right, so this is one of my first big criticisms of the way they run the game. That if they made adjustments, it would just involve making a decision on some manager's part. It wouldn't involve like having people to do any kind of work to like change the game or anything at the code level. It would just be a matter of telling idiots to stop being idiots in some way, adjust their policies, and one of the ways is their help chat. So if you haven't played this game before, this game has no general chat channel. It's got a local chat. You can whisper someone directly, and it's got a help chat which everybody can see and has access to. Now, in the absence of a general chat, you have an incentivization. You have a kind of a temptation for people to use the help chat as a general chat. All right. Um, Now, if you use the help chat, like one of the rules of their game, just the way they manage and moderate the game, if you use the help chat like a general chat, you can get banned from the help chat. Okay. Now that's fine. I think everybody understands that's fine. But where it becomes not fine is how arbitrarily and inconsistently they moderate that channel. So, for example, someone could say something that's inappropriate for the help chat, and they could get instantly banned from it. But then you could have somebody else saying something inappropriate for the help chat, like 2, 4, 5, 10, 15 times, and no action's taken against them. And on top of that, the person who's having no action taken against them could have something that's far more obviously inappropriate for the help chat than the person who actually got banned. Like the person who has no action taken against them could have actually used the help chat to like troll somebody or attack them or insult them or use like even some gamer word in the help chat. You know, like being like obviously just purely offensive, and nothing's done against them a lot of times. But then you could have somebody, you could have some other guy who types something in the help chat that's actually somewhat inappropriate use of the help chat. Like, for example, like there have been people that have been banned for the help chat for asking a question about the game that the moderators decided to interpret as like something else. They maybe thought that the person was like not sincerely asking the question, even though they have no proof of that. They just like insert their own judgment into the situation and then ban that person, right? And and that's just like so insanely bad. Like I don't understand how this sort of thing is not foreseeably understood as as bad a bad way to handle the moderation of that help chat, because ultimately what the result is, right, the consequence of this, it people don't forget about shit like that. Like that will leave a bad taste in people's mouth, and they will hold that against the game itself. Because like that's one of the things that, so I don't know if the developers get. It seems obvious to me, but like regardless of how good your game concept is, even regardless of how well the game is implemented, if you start making bad decisions in other ways, like how the game is moderated or any kind of disciplinary system, none of that will matter. People will still not want to play your game, and your game will still end up dying, regardless of how good those other things are, to some degree, right? Not it's not like a guaranteed your game will die. Like if you had the best running game and the best concept of a game at the same time, but had like brain dead moderators and brain dead GMs, like inconsistently applying like disciplinary systems and bans and shit like that, and just showing themselves to be like just pieces of crap, like then you're it doesn't necessarily mean in those situations the game would die, but it's not going to help it grow. That's for sure. Um, and I could tell you right now that when you're talking about Mortal Online 2, this is not a game that runs perfectly. Like very very far from it. Like it's got none of those good things going for it that that kind of hypothetical I just sort of was commenting on has going for it. So there's no real hugely great things about Mortal that would make you just sort of like completely overlook those insanely bad moderation decisions about the game. I'll give you another example. So I was talking about the help chat, right? And the way the GM sort of show themselves as like, at best inconsistent and arbitrary with the way they moderate it. And at worst, they may even be using the way they moderate it as a way to sort of like satisfy some petty beefs they have with particular players. Or actually there is rumors too that I've heard about how certain GMs are actually showing favoritism to certain players and especially certain guilds. I've heard GMs are actually playing the game in certain guilds in some cases. I mean, and everybody understands. I don't think there's a person out there, other than perhaps a GM, who thinks that's a good thing. Or GMs and people with power to discipline and actually, essentially use cheat codes legitimately, are actually playing for, guilds. Like our players in the game actually fighting against other players. So I mean, I would think that goes without saying, but I've actually, some other games I've actually heard moderators and GMs and admins like actually argue that that's not a bad thing at all, and it's perfectly fine. And saying things like, "Oh, they're just chosen. They're just admins who have been chosen because they're such good people. They would never, abuse their powers and things like." Get the fuck out of here, like that, as if that even matters. Like, as first of all, as if that's even believable, but second of all, like as if that even matters. Like it's just like when you in law, right? Like you if you even have like a bias or a possible bias against someone, then you can be disqualified as a judge. Doesn't matter. There's no review of any bias even exists. The only review that's done is there a possible conflict of interest there? Is there a possible bias? And if the answer is yes, then the judge is automatically disqualified from being a judge. And it's just like when I hear any admin or GM like say something different, it's just I think that's a big kind of red flag right there. And basically that's what I'm saying about Mortal. I'm starting to see some big red flags when it comes to the way they moderate and GM and some of the things they say. Um, so that's kind of the help chat, and the help chat again is a good example of some bad decisions that have been made that could easily be different. Yet they've shown a lack of willingness to make adjustments there when they easily could, which again is not a good sign for the future. Because if they're willing to not make adjustments for obviously bad decisions, even in the face of them being objected to by the players, then what's that mean about future things where they have to make a decision? I mean, you have now reason to think that they're gonna make bad decisions about future similar things too. But yeah, that's the help chat. Another thing they do, and this is something that I've more recently been exposed to as a result of using necromancy and ritualism. So, so ritualism involves using pets in the game, and what I didn't know before this is that there are a lot of buggy things and that kind of make it unplayable, that make ritualism not work. And one of them is one specific instance of this is when you pull a ritualism pet out of your stables where they're stored, there's a chance that any other ritualism pet that you have out will just die. It'll just die, like it'll be destroyed. Now, that's obviously like insanely bad. That means the system is broken, right? But the way that this game has sort of reacted to that is they have empowered their GMs, their moderators, admins, to just like compensate the loss. So they'll, like, if your pet died, you can contact the GM, and they have the power to just bring your pet back alive, right where it was before, like, and even teleport it to you. Yeah, which is great. That's great. That's exactly what you would, how you would want them to make their game so that they could easily replace your pets like that. And on top of that, another good thing is there seems to be a GM always available to respond to your request to do so, and there's an in-game kind of way to contact them very quickly. You just hit escape and you press this button, and then you type a sentence or a couple lines out about what went wrong. You hit enter, and then usually within a minute or two you get a response, which is great. That's great too. Okay, but what's not great is apparently these GMs do not compensate for times that it happens. They kind of make a judgment call on the spot of whether they think the pet should be compensated or not, regardless of if it was the game's fault or not. That is incredibly bad. Like, you're just leaving basically your fate of your game up to whether, like, the mood of one of these, I'm trying not to be mean, right? But one of these guys, and and they're pissing people off because, likely if they're contacting a GM for something like this, they've done it already a bunch of times, and they've come to expect being compensated for similar situations, and they've come to learn that, when the game is at fault for a pet dying, that it will be replaced. And then you run into one of these guys who's like, no, I'm just not going to compensate your pet. I can't verify that it died in the way that you say, or they make something else up. And I'm going to talk a bit about some of the excuses I've heard from some of these guys as well. But they can just, like, some of them can just decide to not reimburse your pet. Um, and these are all situations, at least the ones I'm talking about, where whether or not they would replace the pet ultimately really doesn't matter to anybody but the person that lost the pet. So it's not like if they replace the pet, there'd be some shift in a balance of a battle, or there'd be some effect on the economy or something like that. No, it's like some dude playing the game. He's just maybe just by himself out in the wilderness, fighting maybe I don't know, a bear or something, and you know calls his pet. Pet refuses to come, and so it's just stationary, and then the pet gets caught up to by whatever was chasing them, and the pet dies. So you know, no, when that's happened to me, I've had the pet replaced properly, but in other circumstances, it's not been. And if it's not, if they decide not to, you really can't do much. Like you just like you're gonna have to eat it. You know what I mean? And you know, the kind of one of the things they do that also is very annoying is like if you kind of show you're not willing to accept their decision, which was bad. They tell you to contact their lead GM, and then there's also this kind of ticket submission thing on their website, which effectively is the same thing as contacting their lead GM, and which is like a supervisor, I assume. But I mean, why should you have to go through all that? You know what I mean? Like that's annoying for a player to have to be like, oh fuck, I gotta contact this guy's supervisor now. I gotta submit a ticket on a website. I just want to play the fucking game. Like you got the power to just replace the pet. Just replace the pet. It's not like it's a big deal. And you already know, like in these instances where people are asking for their having their pet replaced, it's not like there are instances that are suspicious. It's like these are known fucking issues with these pets. They're known. The game is known to not work in these ways where the pets are dying. You know, like the pet can even die when you summon the pet out of the stable. Like it's fucking broken. Like just fucking accommodate your players. Like it's not rocket science, guys. And if you don't, you're just gonna piss off your players. Understandably, like you have bad judgment. You have bad judgment. You look like you're biased. You look like you're showing favoritism to some people. You're inconsistent at best. The best way you can look at it is just that they're not consistent with how they do their compensations for when the game breaks. So the worst case scenario is they're actually biased and they're just fucking they're trying to like piss players off that they don't like or something like that. So like this that will kill the game. Like anybody who like I hope like players out there, if you've never taken ritualism, necromancy ritualism, you're not going to understand that sort of frustration. And I'm glad you never have to experience that if you never do. But I mean, it's one of the most common taken things now these days. It's becoming more and more common. There's going to be more and more people that are going to encounter how the game is broken, the way the pets die and don't come and get stuck, and how ultimately they die because of those things. And then you're going to encounter GMs who, most of the time are just going to give you your pet back. But then you're going to encounter GMs that, and yeah, here's the other thing too, like, these GMs, they're getting known by name. Okay, so they have names. So when they talk to you in the game, they have a name just like a player has a name, and you can whisper them directly just like a player. But these GMs are getting reputation by their names. Like certain GMs have a good reputation as being helpful, and other GMs have reputations for being assholes and not helpful. Okay, now you can think of that however you want, but I think most people agree that if someone gets a bad reputation, it's probably because there's been a history of that person doing the things that gave them a bad reputation. So whatever they have a bad reputation for, they likely deserve that, like whatever it is, however it is that people say they are, that's probably accurate. And what I have found is that is actually true. So from you can take my anecdotal experience for however you want, But all the GMs that I've ever had something said about them where they're not helpful, um, and ones that were helpful, I have also found that to be true. So, so in other words, what I'm telling you is there's guys that will be responding to your tickets out there that are assholes and have incredibly bad judgment. They may be stupid in real life or something like that, or maybe they're just mean people that like to piss people off. Maybe they hate their job. Maybe they want to see their game fail because they ultimately hate their boss or something like that. I don't know. Okay, all I'm telling you is that there's absolute either idiots or assholes that are GMs in this game, and you can't depend on them for shit. All right, and they're hurting the game. Okay. Now, what I suggest here's my constructive criticism. Okay, give your GM standing orders to just compensate players whenever they ask for to have something replaced, unless you can see something in the game. I don't know what the GMs can see, but I presume they can see certain things. According to the data of the game, logs, shit like that. Unless you see something that shows beyond any shadow of a doubt that the player is trying to abuse the replacement system, then just give them what they're asking for. Especially if it's a situation where the only person that would matter to is the player who fucking lost their thing because your game didn't work. Okay? That's all you have to do. That's literally all you have to do. And you will instantly improve your game in a way that will make people talk better about it. It will die less, and you'll make more money and save jobs. Okay, if you don't want to make money and save jobs, ignore everything I'm saying and just carry on being losers. Okay, so just like Glory Victus, I was right about them. Their studio died. I'm telling you right now, that's the way you're headed if you continue to make idiot decisions like this. So, and I'm certain not the only one that has similar comments about the way the game's run. I mean, if you're watching my video right now, you're watching one of the people that has endlessly negative things to say about the way the game is run and the people who make decisions and all of that. And Crank, it's crazy. Crank plays the game still, despite how badly he speaks of it. Um, it probably says a lot more about his real life than anything else. But uh, you know, it's hard for me not to laugh whenever I just mention Crank. But um, Crank, admittedly, Crank goes overboard when he talks about how bad things are, and he's far more offensive than he needs to be when he's raising the criticisms of the GMs and devs of this game. But you know what? Ultimately, he's not completely wrong about the things that he's saying. And in fact, he should be listened to more. Like, if you want your game to be good, if you want to keep your jobs, if you want to be successful, you should listen to Crank more. You gotta take what he says with a grain of salt, though, and not like get offended by when he's obviously being, the offensive parts of what he's saying, but the core things of what he's saying, like his criticisms, are generally correct. And on top of that, just like what I'm saying, his criticisms often, if you were to make the adjustments in light of those criticisms that he's suggesting, it would usually not involve any changing of the game itself in terms of the code and whatnot. It would be, or it'd be very little of that. It would be mostly just like telling your people to do things differently than they are right now in some way. And I'm talking to the managers right now. So I mean, you can ignore what I'm saying. You can just go the way these other games have gone, and you can just be another statistic in the gaming industry of a game that fails because it doesn't listen to its players who know better than you do about the game because they're putting the time into actually experiencing it and they're the ones that are paying you, right? So, I know it sounds crazy to listen to those same people, but you want to feel like you're above them or something. I don't know what it is, but I'm just frustrated because I'm seeing this same thing and it's very clear to me what the issue is with these games and the fact that they don't listen to the people that are telling them what they need to do to actually intervene in the downward slope of their games trending, the way it's trending down instead of up. Okay. And these here's the other thing that seems to be overlooked by these devs and admins and GMs and stuff like that too is your players want your game to succeed. Like in their heart, right down to their core, they want your game to succeed. That's why they're pissed because you are doing things to make what they want to succeed fail. All right. So yeah, those are two ways. The way they moderate the help chat, the way they compensate people for when the game breaks, um, in ways that they know the game. They already know the game breaks. So just be more accommodating to your players and listen to your players more. Listen to Crank, fucking Crank, who I kill in this video. You know, he listen to your players, guys. Your game could be a lot better than it is. It could be a lot more successful than it is. Um, or just keep doing the same old things that you've been doing. This having the same old policies and strategies, and continue to see the same trends or worse. There's a lot of other things too, but the other things are more sort of like there are things that I have quite a bit more hope for and currently that will ultimately be fixed. So my focus is not going to be on those things, those other little things. I shouldn't even say they're little, but they're just things I have more hope for that are going to be changed and fixed anyway. Um, and there are things where the actual way the game is coded and whatnot is at the core of what it takes to fix them. Um, so that those sorts of things I'm more forgiving of. You know, and it because it looks like they're probably eventually going to get fixed, and because they involve more than just a decision on someone's part to fix them. But I what I want to focus on is what can be fixed simply by decision making, and can be fixed like right now. No time required. Just somebody making a decision, and then all of a sudden it's things are done differently, and that's all it takes. And all the things I've mentioned so far are basically that, with the exception of the optimization of the game with during the huge battles.